While winter has taken over the garden, now is a great time to do some construction projects that you may have dreamed about. Well, we've been dreaming about adding some garden pathways to our studio gardens, and joining us today is Mr. Brian Hedges. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Steve.
Now, you're with Thurman Building, right?
Materials, yes, sir.
Okay. And Brian's going to make sure that we do it right, and we're going to be putting in one type of garden pathway today, which is using paving stones. Now, Brian, tell us about the paving stones and what types are available to the general public.
Well, what you're looking at is a concrete interlocking paver, and as opposed to like a clay brick paver that the majority of people think of when they think of a paver, the concrete paver is a compressed concrete. It's manufactured just like a concrete block is. That's compressed, very little moisture involved in it to where there's not a freeze-thaw problem in a concrete paver. You can have extreme temperature changes in poured concrete or clay pavers or tile, and they will crack and break. Concrete pavers are based on the European design of the old cobblestone streets. If anybody's ever been to Europe, you notice that all the streets over in Holland and the European cities are all cobblestone. They don't have poured concrete in Europe. The reason being is the freeze-thaw that's in Europe. This goes back thousands of years. The cobblestone streets have been there that long with no deterioration. So what the American and Canadian markets have done, they've gone in and they've designed a concrete paver that's compressed concrete that takes on the aesthetics of a nice looking material that somebody can do decorative work with.
Right. Now, I've noticed you've got several designs too. What makes a difference in those? I mean, is it more just what a person's interest is and color and shape,
sure.
or what?
There are multiples of colors, multiples of shapes depending upon what companies manufacture them. These particular pavers that we're laying today, they're manufactured by Pavestone Pavers out of Grapevine, Texas.
Okay, and what are they called, the actual shape of them?
This particular shape is called Uni-Decor. That's UNI-DECOR.
Okay.
And that's sometimes called a stop sign. People just, call them that for the shape factor.
Okay.
This particular color that we're going to be laying today is called Oaks Blend.
All right.
This particular shape here is called Unistone, and it is the most interlocking of any paver because it interlocks actually on 8 different points. It interlocks on the sides here and then on the points here. So it interlocks the best of any of them. But even the brick-shaped one, which is called a Holland 1, the brick-shaped one still interlocks better than any other type paving substance because of the fact that it's a porous material. Compressed concrete has the pores in the side of it. When you lay it with a sand application, which is what we're going to do here in a little bit, that sand gets into those pores. And when you vibrate that, again later we'll show you how that works with the plate vibrator, that brings that sand up into those joints and into these pores, and that works like those old Chinese finger links we all had as kids. You put your fingers in it and you couldn't get them back out. Works the same thing on the paver principle.
Okay. Well, let's go over here and show them how we're going to do some of this then, Brian. Now, the first thing I guess that really is most important is selecting the site, and that depends on whether you excavate it or you raise it up. Now, in our particular site, we had to dig it out. What is the depth that we need to look at on starting out? Depending,
again, like you said, upon the application area, you try to excavate. Now, in this case, on edging, we're using 2x4s. Now, these 2x4s work just fine for an edging area. What you try to do is you try to have about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of sand below the grade of the paver. So your paver itself needs to end up, when you're starting to lay, after you screed your sand, your paver should be about 1/4 inch above the edging, whatever edging you're using.
So we cut out, what, 4 inches probably down about
4 inches
of our 2x4. Now, there's other options. Of course, we've got the plastic edging down here too. What else could we use as far as edging?
Any type of edging. If you have a poured concrete patio and you want to butt up against it, use that as an existing edge. If you have redwood decking, you want to butt up against that, use it. If you want to use 2x4s, rough cedar, railroad ties, landscape timbers. There's also polyurethane type edging.
And you've got one there to show.
I have a piece here. Now, this is just a sample of the piece. The actual piece is 15 foot long. But as you can see, it's split like this in order that if you'd like to lay your pavers in a radius, you can do that in any shape that you'd like to do. And all this does is it lays right alongside the paver, catches the bottom edge, and as you can see, again, you're seeing just a little bit of the paver edge stick up above that. Lays in place, and this spike drives down
To
through
hold it
that
in
on the
place.
outside.
So edging's important then. I mean, you have to have
Edging
it.
has to be there
Okay.
in the beginning. Once you have your pavers in place, depending upon your soil conditions, if you have real stable soil, a lot of shale, a lot of clay, then your pavers themselves will actually hold themselves in place after you
Okay.
backfill against that.
Well, now we put just sand in here on top of our heavy clay soils. You also tell me that if you're doing a driveway, you may need to add a little bit more under the sand just for security purposes and everything. But after we've used the sand, you tell me it's real important to make sure it's dry. Is that right?
That is primarily the most basic factor in laying the pavers, because if the sand's wet, and that, again, from the old school, they'll tell you, wet the sand down, wet the sand down. The paver principle is to use dry sand, and the reason being is that when you vibrate them in place, that brings that dry sand up between those joints.
Okay.
If you have wet sand, that wet sand will bond together and it won't go up in there as well. So
Right.
after it all dries back out, it filters back out, and you've got some voids in places.
Now, Alan, of course, got our frame in shape, put our sand in, and he came up with a nice little tool here, and you call this what, screeding?
Screed board.
Okay.
This is the same principle as if you're pouring concrete or anything else. What we do is we screed the sand. We've thrown sand in here, and we just start at this end, and you cut it out. As you can see here, it's cut out, notched out to where it will slide on top of there. It's cut down the right dimension to where we've got that 1 7/8 is what
Right.
Alan did on this one. But if you go 1 to 1.5 inches somewhere in there on that, you lay it on top of that, it just screeds real smooth, pulls that sand out. You've got a level base to start laying your pavers on.
Okay. Well, Brian, let's go ahead and start laying some here. Now, with the odd shape, we've had to do some cutting. Explain how we cut them and what we used and why that's important to initiate this setting there.
The majority of your pavers are straight edged, or if they're not straight edged, you can come in. If you're doing a large area, particularly on the unit decor, this shape, if you're doing a large area, it is available with what we call a straight edge piece. The straight edge is already cut here for us. It's manufactured that way. So what we did on a small area like this, we didn't order anything like that because they come in a full pallet as well.
Right.
We just cut our own. So what we did is on this first starter, what we do is we cut this side off as a straight edge, and we cut the top off as a straight edge.
And
Therefore,
what are you using to cut those two? That's real important.
using a masonry blade. This particular cut that we did today, we're using a masonry blade on a handheld saw. If you have access to a table saw, like a masonry saw, it's best to use dry cut. I recommend using dry cut as opposed to wet cut, just for the basic fact that it seems to cut a little bit easier on concrete material as opposed to like your clay material.
Now, that's a very dangerous process, so you have some safety, what, a face shield for
Always use protection.
Okay.
Use your ear protection from the noise, use eye protection, and use goggles or a face mask. Always use guards in place. Never
Okay.
take guards off of the saw.
All right.
Now once again, Steve, this is the starter. And like I said, we cut off both sides of that to give us a straight edge piece. We went ahead and cut a few pieces ahead of time here. We cut the edge off on these
Right.
to where we give this straight edge appearance along here. And it works just that well. It just lays in place. Don't ever be scared of unevenness. The pavers are very, very complementary because you can cut unevenly. You can have little things in there that are kicking them up and moving them to the sides. They will take an awful lot of that out once you vibrate them in place.
So now that we got this side, what do we come across the top?
You can just come in here like this with the next paver.
Okay. And then your
The
next
very
one,
next paver, if you'd like to actually
right.
go straight down this row. Why don't we screed this a little bit farther back?
Okay.
Right back to the gate. We can just come in like this. If we'd like to go ahead and have our straight pieces in.
And you're trying to get them as flush as you can initially, even though the sand will work back up through them?
You have, actually, maybe hard to see on camera, but on the side of the paver, there's a little bit of a lip here.
Okay.
That's a spacer. Not all manufacturers have that, but this particular manufacturer manufactures it with a spacer. That allows what they consider the right amount of sand to come in there.
Okay.
But I can guarantee you, once you put them down and you lay them against each other, that sand that's going to be vibrated in there is going to get there.
Right. Now your next one on the top, you've cut it flush again.
Same thing again. We cut that
Okay.
straight edge off like that. And I've had, now I'm not trying to belittle any profession, but I've had bricklayers and tile setters lay pavers. And they'll sit here and they'll take this and they'll take their rubber mallet and they'll tap it in place and really try to get it level and try to make it to where it just is perfect. Get your bubble level out here. not necessary.
Okay.
Lay them in place, get after it, get down through there with them, and after they're all in place, then it will all level out once you get started.
Now, what would a pallet of these cost? What do they run per square foot if someone's interested in
Well, the
using
price,
some of
just
these?
like, as you stated, square foot wise, the price just like tile or pouring concrete or anything else, your price per square foot on these are going to run around 2 to 2.5 a square foot, depending upon amount of pavers bought for the project, location of delivery.
Sure.
Everything is, now this is a delivered price like up in the Enid where we're from in the Stillwater area. If there's any areas where we go into that require a little more freight, it's going to be a little higher, a little less freight, it's going to be a little less.
Now, Brian, the next step then is after we get them in is what we call the packing, which you've alluded to. Tell us what we're using and how that's going to work real quickly.
Okay, what you're going to use on your packing part of it, after you get your area entirely covered with your pavers, what I recommend is throwing a little bit of sand over the top of the pavers, just as kind of a filter area. And what you'll do is it'll just be broadcast over the top like so. And you'll just take a shovel load of it, throw it across there. Now the plate vibrator, just like our saw that we use to cut the pavers today, can be rented at about any rental center for tool rentals. What it does basically, it runs somewhat like a lawnmower. You start it, you run it across the top of the pavers. What it does, it vibrates the sand that we screeded off underneath here and the sand that we threw on top between the pavers, and like we talked before, it locks them in place.
Okay.
And it just continuously packs against that paver as a plate until it locks them in.
Well, Brian, it seems like a really pretty simple do-it-yourself project other than cutting them, I guess, and all that depends on the choice and design that a person comes up with.
Like we showed, the Holland paver, which is just a brick shape, there's very little cutting on that at all.
Right. Well, we appreciate you helping us and donating some of the materials and giving us your expert advice on this. It's been very helpful and hopefully a shortcut when we're trying to finish this up.